Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your media, AV, and otherwise tech-related questions 7 days a week, but you only get to see them 6. Alexander is our reader today, and will start us off with the first question. Alexander, what do we have?
This one's coming in from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas asks, the Ross Carbonite Ultra Solo seems like Ross's answer to the ATEM Constellation. Could you see Ross introducing a mini range as an answer to the ATEM Mini?
Alexander, go ahead.
Well, you know, anything is possible. Ross is obviously one of those companies that makes really, really high-end broadcast equipment, and they would be the first company that started out making very, very high-end gear and kind of slowly worked their way into a entry-level market. We've seen this with companies like SSL, you know, made high-end, very, very expensive, large format analog consoles. Now they make $200 audio interfaces. We've seen companies like Audient, another British company, make huge analog, expensive, you know, $100,000 consoles that now make $200 interfaces. So anything's possible. And just looking at this product, not having firsthand experience with it, it seems like they are trying to get into a slightly different price bracket. So maybe this is a portent of things to come in the future.
Mickey.
Yeah, as Alexander said, there's anything's possible. Though this is certainly like the ATEM Mini type of support, rather. So it would be quite a big lift for them if they're wanting to chase down this market. But it's a possibility.
Next question.
This one's coming in from Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. If you never, ever want to hear people say the quote, audio is too low on a YouTube live stream, how do you ensure your levels are end-to-end metered, and how could Fairlight Live be utilized?
Alexander, go ahead.
Yeah, so there are both hardware and software ways to do this, but let's talk a little bit about a meter that over a very short term period does a measurement, and we aim for a number of negative 24 LUFS, where one LUF equals 1 dB, basically. So that's one type of broadcast standard. So as far as loudness is concerned, there are unofficial standards like Apple. The difference between negative 14 and 24 is massive. Negative 14 is a much louder number, and there's no way to achieve this without processing. So whether you do processing and by means of multi-band compression, limiting multiple stages of that, whether you do that in software or hardware, it doesn't matter, but you will need it. There is no way that you will get any individual person on your show without processing to get up to those ridiculously loud volumes. And so how I do it on my own show is with hardware. I use a production tool called Mimo Live. I send ISO audio feeds out live. I send ISO audio feeds out of the app over Dante. It goes into a digital console where it goes into multiple buses of very light compression and gradually works its level up to something around negative 18 is kind of where I shoot at. Personally, I have my own opinions about louder levels on YouTube, but you do require that processing. And to your question about Fairlight being utilized, yes, that is certainly a tool that we should probably explore and maybe test and see how well it works.
Ronnie.
So Fairlight is, for those that doesn't know, Fairlight Live is the new beta software that is coming out from Blackmagic Design, which is actually just a big, relatively advanced software mixer. And it can easily be put to these types of shows where you are streaming or maybe sending audio circumstances, at least not for now. And for the measurements, it has a built-in LUFS meter, which can change type or standard that they show the numbers for. I think that said, the metering that is showing in the display is really small. What we tend to use is in the audio chain, we kind of pick out the signal that we want to measure. Normally it's the Pro. Julian has a free software that can show you these numbers over time as it scrolls by, and it's really easy to use, and you can even have that both Fairlight Live, and you can use other meters to just show you and display this. And we use Julian because it can be maximized and it's really big, and we can see it from afar and have a visual inspection every moment you have a chance to just glance at it to the side, and you see the meters are kind of good. And this is very important for those that are participating from their own studio. They see that a lot of people are using, plug it in, and are getting huge problems getting the signal levels they need to actually be able to hit that -16, for instance, LUFS that YouTube requires or wishes you have. So the difference between people are really important, and LUFS, any type of LUFS meter will help you get that numbers kind of stabilized between all participants.
Mickey.
Yeah, I think for myself, in a broadcast situation, hit your target levels once you know that what a calibrated room sounds like. You can just keep your eyes on your multi-view if you're doing a live broadcast, and not have to divert and keep on peeking at the meter. I mean, it's handy to have a meter to the side that you can just double check things with, especially your long-term loudness. But if you can tell just with your ears that you're hitting a specific loudness. If you're too loud, too quiet, then you don't really need to keep on looking at a meter. So number one for me is good monitoring and a good listening environment. And even like if you're working out of a venue and you don't have level, of course, to mix to loudness level to mix to. You mentioned, Guy, you mentioned specifically YouTube. YouTube wants -14 LUFS. That's based on the 1770-1 standard. I don't like that personally. That's way too crushed for my liking, especially for just speech. There's no real on YouTube. There's no real hard standard that you have to hit. It's just what they are expecting. So I myself um, but yeah, of course, have a standard you need to hit. How can Fairlight Live be utilized? If it works and it works well, then yeah, you can absolutely utilize Fairlight Live. It has the ability to bring in AU and VST plugins. AU, of course, only on the Mac OS side. If you need to send monitors, create the monitor mix for musicians, or if you have to send a side tone feed for your talent. I'm curious about the latency there, and if it would be usable, you'd most likely need to have a separate monitor desk to do that, and not rely on software mixing to create live monitoring feeds like that. But in terms of strictly the broadcast mix, if it turns out to be reliable and usable and it works, then yeah, can use Fairlight Live.
Jeff.
And just to add a little bit onto that specifically for Fairlight, and let me show these here. They do have, just to point out, a bunch of native great meters, so to let some of us after hours all get together and bang on his installation and play with it and do some tests. But it looks like most, if not all of the native plugins basically are there. So you have these, and then on every bus, including the master bus, you have a one called meter, and you have another one that you can put up called loudness meter. So you have a whole bunch of meters, and again, you can set them specifically to say this is the YouTube standard. One thing to Mickey's point, while there isn't an explicit level, they will not let you go louder than 14. So they will lower your overall volume if you're too loud. They won't bring you up. So if you're too low, they won't bring you up, but they will definitely bring you down. So that's one thing to keep in mind.
Alexander.
Okay, and another thing, multiple buses and stages, going out to a live stream. But one of the things that you can do is ensure that your live stream is on a separate aux bus, stereo aux bus, and you can still apply some processing to that, say on your XR18, apply compression and limiting there at that stage, at least to get it up to a more, if the levels, and again, this is where, and Mickey made a point of this, you need proper metering. So on the cheap, you can do this very inexpensively with the apps that were mentioned previously, like Yuli and Loudness Meter. I would recommend buying the Pro version. It's very inexpensive. Install that on a computer, and then just do your processing in your
Join. That's officehours.global/join. Quick questions, go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global, or follow the QR code that is on your screen. Next question.
All right, this question's coming in from Andre Dole in Berlin. Customer has L Acoustics Kiva stereo line array and a Yamaha DM7 console. They want to upgrade to 5.1, 7.1, maybe even 9.1, ready for the future. Which DSPs are recommended? That's digital signal processing. For Surround6 website, you will see their various system processors, which they will recommend. But that said, what I would recommend you do is talk to their team, because they have really good engineers there that can really help you design and build a system. So that would be my first recommendation, is if you don't have a lot of experience.
So yeah, since you mentioned the DM7 and you mentioned specifically channel-based mixing, I would take a look at the broadcast package from for the DM7. You can get this as a standalone license, or it also comes with the control extension for the DM7 or DM7C. In terms of processing, it depends what processing you need. If you're looking for, say, reverbs and delays, I would probably look at plugins from, like, say, Liquid Sonic Cinematic Rooms. It's one of my go-to surround reverbs. And, of course, also the good old reliable Altiverb from Audio Ease. And also, I've started to use more and more Paragon from Nugent Audio. Although my preference for my core reverbs in a surround mix or an immersive mix are actually stereo reverbs panned to specific places in the room. I much prefer that because it gives me a bit more control, as opposed to relying on all my verbs being I wonder if they have screenshots here. Yeah, they don't really have much in terms of visuals on their webpage, but Elisa is L Acoustics' own immersive mixing platform. It's not channel-based, so if that works with what you're trying to do, 5.17191, it's an object-based mixing system, so it's not tied to a specific layout, panning, and automation. So take a look at Elisa, get the demo unit in and play around with it. It takes in, natively takes in AVB for audio. So if you're already in the AVB world with your L Acoustic system, you'd be right at home. Another thing to look at in terms of just another tool to help you in your surround or immersive mixes. I'm assuming this is probably like a theater or opera. Take a look at the tools, the surround mixing tools that was added to QLab last year. They've added a lot of automation tools as well as panning tools in there that can certainly help you build a more complex mix for surround.
Ronnie.
Yeah, and since it's a company that creates a really advanced acoustic simulation software, that is, you can even have a free trial for that. So this is for planning before you do the installation, and they have all the profiles for both Elisa that Mickey mentioned, and all their speaker setups and configurations. And it directly, as I understand it, from the demo I saw the guys do at the trade show I was at, they do integrate with both of these, both hardware and software from Acoustics. So this is kind of the pre-phases. So take a look at that.
Mickey.
So yeah, that product is called the Mini. It used to be called the Mini Recorder and the Mini Monitor. Now it's called Ultra Studio Monitor 3G. It's still available. Real affordable, 140 US. That's to spit SDI out of Thunderbolt feed, and the product that takes SDI into Thunderbolt is called the Ultra Studio Recorder 3G.
Perfect. Next question.
Thank you for that. Douglas Carmichael asks, for those that use MacBook Pros on show sites, have you ever brought an external monitor like the Espresso 17 Pro on site with you?
Jeff.
Well, unfortunately, Douglas has just caused another expensive item to go into my shopping list. I am a fan of these external monitors. This one in particular is touchscreen, which is interesting. He did specify Mac. So yes, I mean, they show it actually working with. This one is interesting because it does particularly come with this tall magnetic stand, which I like, that it gets it at eye level. These are super useful. So, and I'll show real quick. I mean, I carry a lapel when I travel, another brand. The issue is just that it comes with a case, kind of like an iPad case. So it's just like the foldable stand, but it's basically at table level. So I do like this. This one I'll show real quick. I mean, they do show the touchscreen working fine on Mac OS, at least here. So we see that they are in Mac OS, at least in this demo, and it appears to work with a pen and all that neat stuff. But I am a fan of these monitors, any of these kind of real ultra portable monitors.
Ronnie.
Yeah, I think.
Ronnie.
Yeah, I think the idea is really good, and the problem is finding the ones that are kind of rugged, good enough, and have the right resolution, and even some of these also have HDMI input, so you can use it as a monitor from your store. And the thing is that I would love to have these. Difficult to find really good critical reviews of what is actually working in a live production setting. So that is what have been holding me back. So for now, we're using mostly rack-mounted displays inside racks, etc. And just to be sure, having a touch monitor does not necessarily mean that you have touch on your Mac OS. So if you're bringing Macs to the fight, be aware that touch displays are not that easy to get working.
Next question.
This one is from Hazma Gajar in Cape Town. I have ATEM 2ME and a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 6K. Would like to shade the camera with ATEM software control. Have two bi-directional Blackmagic converters. What exactly is the video chain?
All right, I'll take it. So the trick. Oh, Mickey's got it. All right, take it away, Mickey.
Oh, just pass it right on. So yeah, Hasmuk, of course, you would want to feed the SDI out of the converter into your switcher, and then you need to feed one of your outputs. It could be any of the outputs back to the bidirectional converter. One key thing that you have to do though is with the settings of the bidirectional converter, set exactly which camera number that the camera that plugged in is, so that it lines up with how it's set in the ATEM. So if you have your camera going into input 1 in the bidirectional converter, make sure it is camera number 1, so that it knows which data to pull out of that SDI return feed coming out of the switcher.
Ronnie.
Yeah, and you probably need a splitter as well. So one-to-many splitter if you have a lot of cameras. If you have only one camera, there's no problem. And be aware, you can also do this with Blackmagic ATEM Mini Pros and Minis, I think, using HDMI, as long as the bidirectional converter is of the not the oldest one. I don't think the oldest one was able to do this, and then just connect the SDI in and SDI out from that bidirectional converter to your camera, and you can shade it also using HDMI, single HDMI connection into the ATEM Minis as well.
Yeah, Hosmuk, there are two places you need to set that camera number. The first is you need to set the independent assignable 3G SDI output. That one needs to be set to the camera. And then in the bidirectional, you need to go in and you need to set that same camera number in the bidirectional. If you don't do both of those things, you're going to drive yourself crazy. Next question.
This one's from Guy Cochran in Seattle, USA. Any audio news from NAB?
Ronnie, go ahead.
Yeah, one I've seen and kind of are drawn a little bit to is the electrosonic probably tech that is put into the new wireless microphone from RØDE, which is now eventually delivering a product that is also able to communicate on the UHF band, which is, they call it, what is it? They call it no body blocking or something like that, which is, I find it hilarious. A body does block also UHF signals. So, but it's getting more and more professional products from RØDE, even though they are not kind of aiming for the real professional productions, but they are kind of moving into an area where they add really professional technology into prosumer products, which is really interesting to see. And the price points is always getting where they should be probably. And they also include timecode and a lot of other features in this and onboard recording. So that is one of the few products I've seen that is really cool, in addition to everything that Blackmagic has launched regarding the mixer, the software mixer, and the software controllers, that the physical hardware controllers going with that. And it looks kind of promising. Might be tempted to test one of those and see how they work. But you know, it's too much to get an overview over just a few days in. I need to have at least a month afterwards to be able to consume every information bits that we have.
I was blown away by the number of products that Blackmagic announced, and all of them, from camera all the way, like it was an entire echelon of stuff. It was rack mountable, and it was 2110 IP based, and it was from stem to stern. They completely changed every single product that they had and made a 2110 version of it. Talk about a shot across the bow. Next question.
All right, this one's coming in from, there we go, Hazmat Gajar in Cape Town. Have the privilege to build a new studio for podcasts and talent in studio for Zoom broadcast. Can have minimum of 50 square foot meters space. How should I go about it? Should landlord install ceiling tiles, false ceiling?
Alexander, go ahead.
This is probably where you want to get someone like an acoustician to actually help design the space. Now, that can get expensive real fast, so I don't know what the budget is, Hazmat. Do you have 20,000, 30,000, more, less? That will impact how you design and build that room. One of the things that you can do, which won't cost you anything, is one of the companies that I work with, and I absolutely love their acoustic panels, is a company called Prime Acoustic in Canada. And you can actually email them. This is their website, and there is a link on this page somewhere where you can actually, if you send them photos of the space, of good clear photos, maybe even a LiDAR scan, and give them the dimensions of the space, they will actually send you a quote for good, better, best, depending on how much coverage you want for that space. So I would recommend talking to them first. And if you just want to attempt to do this yourself and put some acoustic panels as well, and think about how much absorption do you want? Do you want the room to be a little more lively sounding? And if that's the case, maybe you need a little bit less absorption, more diffusion, but probably more absorption for this, because this is just going to be spoken word stuff, and you're not going to have live musicians in the room or anything like that. So I'd recommend maybe talking to Prime Acoustic.
Jeff.
And couldn't agree more. In fact, I had a few of these queued up that I'll show. and all of them seem to, offer varying levels of free analysis, at least to some extent. Arlex is funny because if you look at theirs, so you can likewise submit all of your room specs. They outright say that it will take anywhere from days to several weeks potentially to get back to you. So act now. Now, the funny thing with Prime Acoustics, actually, I hadn't seen this before, is one of the ones I recommend. They have this acoustic calculator that you come on here and you can start entering all your specs and really map it out. And then they have this room designer, which is pretty wild, where you can just start kind of really diagramming what you have. But that's the point, is they all want to help you pick out what is right for your room. GIK, G-I-K Acoustics is another one, and Acoustical Solutions is another. All great companies that make these custom panels. And also, one of the things I always like is I think all of them now offer the ability to do these art panels. So you can usually choose from a whole host of artwork that they have, or you could submit your own artwork that they make panels from. So it just looks like a nice painting on the wall, but they are panels. So I would definitely, as Alexander said, start with the acoustics of the room.
Mickey.
Yeah, 100% support treating the room. But above that, another thing to consider is, of course, soundproofing, making sure noise from outside doesn't come in and any louder noise from inside doesn't leak out. I know, Hasmukh, you had toured an actual recording studio facility recently. If you recall, the soundproofing that they had done, it was, nice double or triple wall construction with insulation in between. And also, like, even, they had nice, very heavy doors, steel doors that were it was double doored. So there's always at least two layers of steel for sound to go through on the door frame. That's one thing to consider. You mentioned drop ceiling with ceiling tiles. That's certainly something that you would want to avoid in a studio environment, because having a drop ceiling would limit how high you can raise lighting, set decoration, any acoustic treatment in the space. You do not want to have a drop ceiling there that would hinder how high you can bring those up. So big no-no. Along with your soundproofing, don't only think of the walls and the doors. Also think of the ceiling. Like, I don't know if this new space that you're looking at currently has neighbors above you. You might also want to consider soundproofing in the ceiling side, and also raising the floor so that you are mitigating any rumble from outside, say, trucks passing by outside, or vibrations in the building through the structure. Removing that coupling by adding a raised floor with there are companies like what was shown earlier, RLX. They have these little rubber riser mounts that you can use so that you can raise the floor on something that's relatively soft and absorbent of those vibrations. So consider soundproofing the room as well.
Ronnie.
Yeah, I would definitely not have a ceiling lowered. I would use that space for preventing standing waves. So I think of sound in a room, even if it's for recording or listening, I think of it like in 4 phases. So what Mickey said, preventing audio from the outside coming in, then preventing the inside sound from reflecting or creating standing waves in the base area, and or the low end, and that needs to be handled carefully. In case of standing waves, the problem is if you have length, height, and width in the room that are kind of creating a difficult number, that is a problem. Then you have, of course, higher frequency reverberation that is reflecting from any surface. Floors, for instance, if you have a really hard floor surface like the Australian Jara that I have in my living room, it's impossible. It's so reflective. Nothing can fix that. Then there is a thing that a few people are thinking of, and that is noise from equipment you bring into the room. So also have kind of a thought about that. So reducing fan noise, if you have computers running at full speed using vMix or whatever you have, they are generating a lot of noise internally, and if that gets out of the casing they are in, it will definitely add to the self noise of the room. And then eventually the strategy about placing stuff, so having the microphones at the correct distance from any reflecting wall, etc. It's also important. And of course you have camera angles and lighting and all the other stuff. So I would use the ceiling, the high ceiling, to have a grid so that you can place lights in a good position instead of just hanging it down. And one resource that I'm always plugging is this a guy called Jesco. He has this web page called Acoustic Insider, and he has a really big YouTube channel with a lot of very advanced strategies and thoughts about how to soundproof and make a listening and recording area much better than you were thinking of. So first and foremost, think of the bass traps in the room. So get rid of all the standing low and bass trap sounding things, and you will be better off than if you did not think of that.
Jeff.
Two things I wanted to add. First of all, this is a great tip from Mickey. I thank you. I didn't even realize they have it, but here are these floor risers from RLX, pretty cool. And then one thing to Alexander's point about deciding whether or not you want the room to sound a little bit more lively, I would say for a podcast studio, assuming you're going to have guests in there, meaning regular folks, not professional broadcasters, content creators that know mic technique, invariably you're going to, and talking about levels before, invariably you're going to do your mic checks and they're going to say, this is me, I'm talking on the mic, I'm ready to go, and then action. And then they're going to say, well, you know what I think is, and then, so you're going to end up having to raise levels up, and you then are raising reflection and everything else. So I would err on the side of more absorption, a little bit less liveliness if you are going to have guests in that studio.
Mickey.
I have to support what Ronnie had touched on earlier. If this is, especially if this is something a bit more long term, build a specific rack room or equipment room or machine room. Put all the equipment there, because I know in your previous facility, Hasmukh, the all the equipment was right beside your TD, like right beside their ear, and the TD was also the person mixing in this situation. No, build out a separate place to put all your equipment, as well as that would another advantage with that is you're centralizing where all your wiring lands. You're also centralizing where all your power management and backup power has to land. You're not spreading it all across the facility. You put all your rack UPSs in one place. You wire up your generator or whatever backup power you have to a single place. You don't have to think about spreading it all over the facility. It's only your studio where your talent is, as well as the rack room. You're also centralizing the cooling that you have to apply for the equipment. You're not having to deal with making sure all of these rooms are at 16 degrees Celsius. You only have to do that in one room and keep the other rooms in a comfortable temperature for everyone else. Certainly build out a separate machine room.
Alexander.
Yeah, and just one other thing I wanted to mention, because this company and also their YouTube channel, I forget the guy's name. He if you want to get a completely free education, I mean, this guy's a real acoustician. Like, he knows math It's amazing. And they have a fantastic forum that you can participate in. They will answer questions. They offer free room analysis. Yes, they do sell products too. But just his YouTube channel alone, it's called acousticfields.com. So this is the website and also the YouTube channel, which I recommend you also check out there. And he kind of does it like sort of a classroom style video with him standing in front of the chalkboard. And he explains incredibly complex, because I'm not a math guy, I'm not an acoustician, but he explains really complex subject matter of how acoustics work in the real world in a very simplified, like high school level kind of way. So, and I'll post a link to that channel. I recommend you also have a look at that.
Where else are you going to get a dozen minutes on room treatment? This is just how we roll. And if you like what we do, volunteer or donate. officehours.global/volunteer if you want to give your time, and officehours.global/donate if you'd like to give your money. We are a 501c3, which I believe makes us tax deductible, but check with your tax professional. And on with the show. Next question.
All right, next up is from Brody Hefner in New York City. Using a MixPre audio interface via Macbook M4pro processor worked fine on Zoom meetings, but for Zoom webinar, the audio in and out failed. MixPre was still selected for audio in and out in Zoom. Nothing else changed. Has anyone else seen this? Suggestions?
Ooh, Mickey, help us out.
So yeah, I'm curious of a couple of things, Brody. First off, are you an attendee in the webinar, or are you on the panel in the webinar? If you're just part of the audience,
He says, I'll just add in chat, he says he was presenter.
Okay. Okay, if you are one of the presenters, if you're brought into the panel, I'm curious if one of the co-hosts, or if the production had set up interpreters or interpretation, because if that's set up, and if it's set up incorrectly, or if the default language is different from your default language, you may have to select what language you want to listen to, especially if, again, things are built up incorrectly and routed incorrectly. Another thing is, Brody, are you able to recreate the issue? You mentioned a MacBook Pro, so you're on Mac OS, and Mac OS, the audio engine in Mac OS called Core Audio likes to crash randomly. So I'm wondering if you are able to recreate the issue, especially after a reboot. Those are things to look into. If you're able to recreate it, then it's slightly easier to pin down what may be causing it.
Jeff, go ahead.
So, and I'm looking at Brody's additional information in the chat here, and he does mention the first thing that always comes to mind. So anytime anyone has audio device selection problems on Mac, I always say make sure that the Mac OS audio devices are set to what you want. Now, when you're talking about a local client, it shouldn't matter, but still often it does. And he does mention, it's a little unclear because he does say that when he changed Mac OS settings to use those devices, it worked. But then if I'm reading this right, after a reboot, it did not work. So I'm not quite tracking that, but that's that. I can't tell you how many times problems have been solved when I just have the person select first, quit the app, whatever the problematic app is. Particularly, by the way, this is a Chrome thing. So when you're using browser-based as an attendee to anything like a Google Meet or Teams or anything that's Chrome browser-based, that's particularly a Chrome problem. But I've seen it with other things where if you first select the devices that you want in macOS settings, then go into the app, a lot of times that works. And it seems to have helped here.
Ronnie.
So I have one really good idea about this because I've experienced this numerous times, not especially with MixPre, but with other devices. So the M series from Apple, silicon type of machine, they are really, really aggressively trying to save power. And in doing that, it always makes some external devices act up. And this is nothing new, I would say. It's been like that for many, many years. One way to fix that is to prevent your machine from trying to go to power saving modes. And I always install an application or an app called Caffeine, which is a app that you can turn on and off. It can start with your machine when you boot, and then you just click it so it's lighting up, and that is kind of caffeine for your machine, like caffeine is for your body. It keeps the machine running at full throttle all the time, almost full throttle, and it prevents it from trying to go to sleep. Even though I've experienced even running that application, it still does things with external devices. So don't be sure that this can fix it. It can also be, as a second ID, it can also be the USB cable you're using.
Jeff.
So following Brody's additional information in the chat here, he does say that the webinar admin was a government agency, so maybe they had settings. But I'd also offer up now the opposite, which is so it sounds like this was not Brody's machine. And also, we've all experienced people swear on a Bible that nothing has changed, but when you ask enough questions, you ultimately get to the things that have absolutely changed. And one of them, quite frankly, could simply be an OS update. So if the machine is set to automatically install updates, now again, you're kind of arguing potentially the opposite. The machine is ultra locked down, but if updates are installing, and you probably won't be able to determine this because you won't know what was on there previously, I assume. So that's one thing that potentially has changed. But yeah, I never, ever, ever take anyone's word when they tell me nothing has changed.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Next question.
Okay. We've all done that. Angelo Jack in Brooklyn, New York asked, does anyone have experience with A&H CQ series versus Yamaha DM3-D for event conference live sound recording?
Oh, Alexander, you know a few things about that, don't you?
I do. In fact, I've sold a handful of those CQ mixers to various House of Worship companies, and they all love them. The CQ12, CQ18, really easy to set up for a lot of volunteers. The out-of-box experience for those, they're kind of designed to have very simplified controls, and it doesn't expose more complicated things like the PEQ, that's the parametric EQ by default. However, you can put it into an advanced mode, which will unlock the more advanced features if you need access to that and if you feel comfortable. They sound fantastic. They have a really nice analog to digital converter in there that'll go up to 96 kilohertz, which is really unusual for these lower cost digital mixers. Typically, like you'll find some of the older products in the market, like even the X32 from Behringer, or the even cheaper XR18 or the Soundcraft UI series. They typically will not do higher than 48 kilohertz sample rate. So that's really nice. The Yamaha DM3 is really at a whole other level too. It is more money, but I do absolutely love the sound of it. In fact, I have two of them running here, and I have just acquired my third DM3-D, so I am definitely a bit of a Yamaha DM3 fanboy. The preamps sound fantastic. They're really clean. They're actually a step up even from the previous TF series, and they work really, really well. There are some limitations with the routing and stuff like that, and the fact that there's just only like a single stereo matrix on there. But if you can get around those limitations and understand what you're getting into, they do sound fantastic. And with the latest 3.0 firmware update, they added a 8-channel auto mixer to it. It's not Dugan branded, and it isn't as good as some of the actual auto mixers that are in the higher end consoles. So I'm a little bit disappointed in that area. But for the price, it's really hard to get something with Dante that sounds that good, that is really that clean, that has a very, very low noise floor. So highly recommended for that.
Mickey.
So yeah, if you mentioned event conferencing, live sound recording, if you are just multi-tracking, I think between the two, I would rather bring like a CQ 20B, because it's a much more compact package, and if you're just multi-tracking and you're not needing to push faders, then that would be easier to work with. But if ever you're trying to make a live to tape mix, like a broadcast mix or a recording mix on site live, then you certainly want to have faders to push. So between the two, I would go with the DM3-D, so that you have actual tactile faders that you can use to create a proper mix, as opposed to having to rely on a touchscreen. For me, like I can't make a competent mix on a touchscreen. I want faders. I don't want to have to look at the screen to know what fader I'm touching. I just want to put my hands on the faders and mix. In terms of multi-track recording, specifically looking at the CQ20B, it has 24 by 24 I/O via USB. Whereas the DM3-D has 16 in, 16 out via Dante, and 18 in, 18 out via USB. So you can, ISO on the DM3-D, you can ISO record every one of your analog inputs or any of the input sources, up to 16, plus a stereo mix or whatever combination of 18 channels you want to record. In terms of recording software, for the past year and a half, 2 years, year and a half, 2 years, I've been heavily using an application called Wild Tracks. It can bring in audio from any class compliant audio interface, and it has complete metadata support, so you can really tag all the metadata lines that you need to be able to fill in, so that when you bring it to your NLE or you bring it into your DAW, you have all the proper metadata in there. It can timecode stamp your recordings either via a hardwired timecode source, or even through your ACN or your Bluetooth from your ambient timecode generators or tentacle timecode generators. But of course, why do Bluetooth when you can just hardwire timecode in? But yeah, I've been very happy with Wild Tracks over the past couple of years.
Ronnie.
Yeah, so I've been using both for some DM3 for just a few things, and we have larger Allen heats that we bring to the sites or venues that needs more kind of live musicians experience. But for all other smaller venue conferences, live stream, Zoom, interactive, hybrid, you name it, we always tend to use our CQ series. If you just have a big duffel coat, you can put it in the pocket. It's so small, it's so overpowered for the size and the price point that it's kind of a no-brainer for us to use that. And it sounds really good, except for the headphone outputs. Those are kind of not good. And it even have a decent auto mixer if you have the input gain set to a kind of a normal setting, and it's really easy to use, and you have all these scenes you can save, and you can have different configurations. And even if you don't have physical faders for a conference, you tend to not need physical faders for any musical or cultural application. I would choose a mixer with faders.
Alexander.
And I'll be very quick on the DM3. Speaking of headphones, I can plug in a 450 ohm pair of Audio-Technica headphones, and they're open back, extremely demanding, tons of volume, no issues there. So if you're worried about high-end mastering grade reference headphones, no issues on the DM3.
Next question.
Next up is from Chuck Swan in Bristol, Wisconsin. Given a temporary hybrid Zoom setup with a single Windows computer and external analog mixer, what is the best way to get the audio from a screen-shared video clip to the mixer, PA, and Zoom? Mac guy, not familiar with Windows.
Ooh, great question. Alexander, go ahead.
So one thing I would suggest is please do not use the pedestrian 3.5 millimeter unbalanced headphone jack to get audio out of the computer. Use something like this, the Radial USB Pro DI box. So USB into the computer so you get high quality audio coming out. That's not going to run the risk of picking up line level noise. And that comes out XLR out so that you can take that, plug that into your console. And that's a way that you can get high quality audio out of the computer into the PA system through the analog console.
Mickey.
Yeah. As Alexander mentioned, using a USB audio interface, a class compliant one, so that it's just plug and play. You don't have to install drivers. Cheap Focusrite Scarlett will work. The Radial boxes are really good. Of course, use a balanced connection between the interface and also the mixer, and you can create your grab your mix from there and send it to where it needs to be sent. Of course, don't send it back if you need to send the mix minus back to Zoom. Actually create a separate mix that doesn't include the sound coming from Zoom. But yeah, an analog audio interface for the computer.
Ronnie.
I just have to shamelessly plug this invention from Sonect. This is the entire thing. It's just a USB interface, USB-C, and it's XLR cables, and it's sounding amazing. It is just plug and play. It's own output only, and it comes in this amazing bag if you purchase that as an extra. It's always on me on every job we have, even jobs that we don't need anything. This is just a lifesaver. It's always in our production kits, and yeah, it's a no-brainer.
Last question.
This one's from Talala Lopez Waterman in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. What external NICs, that's network interfaces, to use with MacBook Pro are recommended for use with Dante Virtual Sound Card?
Take it away, Mickey.
So yeah, I've started switching over. Well, actually, it's been like a year since I've started switching over to these 2.5 gig Ethernet NICs from what's this brand? StarTech. And I started using them because they were specifically mentioned by Audinate in their documentation. And yeah, I think pretty much all I used to rely a lot on NICs from Belkin and also I think TrendNet. Those have been rock solid. But Audinate had released documentation that states that there's a specific chipsets that they recommend because they have a more direct access to the data with Dante Virtual Sound Card, and they specifically stated this as an example. And yeah, every couple months I just buy a whole bunch of them to deploy in different installations and also put in Pelican cases. They've been pretty rock solid.
And that'll do it for Office Hours, episode 2220. The Tlaloc traversal for today is 55,000 miles, 88,000 kilometers, and 435 million bananas for scale. And I almost forgot. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you for the back-end crew. And thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode of Office Hours. Take care.
That was a good one.
Wild meters. Okay, or Wild Tracks. That's a new one by me. I love it.
And
Subscription.
if you just search Wild Tracks, you don't find it right away. You find a lot of other stuff.
Mickey, why do you like Live Tracks over any DAW? Like even I know a lot of people use Reaper because it's pretty stable in a live environment. It's got good metering too.
It's meant specifically. The big thing for me is the very comprehensive amount of metadata you can add to your recordings, and it's designed for tracking in the field. So it has automations, in terms of metadata. The next time you hit record, it's gonna increment that take counter.
Okay, so it's very specific for that type of workflow.
Yeah. Whereas if you just track in the DAW,